The guitar. Old as mankind, new as tomorrow. The distinctive sound of a fine guitar strikes a satisfying note in our lives. Where does the distinctive sound of a guitar begin? If it is a Gibson, it is recognized as the finest by musicians. And the sound of guitars begins here, with the finest of woods, slowly aged like vintage wine. Only a fraction of the world's finest wood is good enough.
Federal agents searched the Gibson guitar plant here in Music City. Several hundred Gibson guitar employees got to go home early today due to an unusual circumstance, a raid by federal agents.
But on November 17, 2009, someone else showed up at Gibson's door.
Mid-morning, I get a call that Homeland Security was raiding our factory.
Gibson CEO Henry Jeskowitz, a musician himself, has been running the company since 1986.
I thought it was a joke because, Homeland Security raiding a guitar factory makes no sense.
Armed federal agents showed up at Gibson's Nashville headquarters and their factory 2 miles away.
He didn't have time to react. All that's left are the stumps, already covered over by vegetation.
Les machines qu'ils ont et l'organisation du travail qu'ils ont fait en sorte que les choses vont très vite.
They weren't looking for bombs. They weren't looking for terrorists. They were looking for wood.
Spruce from the Pacific Northwest, Michigan maple, mahogany from Central and South America, ebony from Malagasy Republic and Ceylon, and rosewood from Brazil are carefully selected and matched for grain and texture.
The Fish and Wildlife Service were there, along with Homeland Security. They claimed the wood, imported from Madagascar, violated a conservation law known as the Lacey Act. But Gibson said it was the same wood they used all along, wood that many other companies use for their products.
50 trees were stolen in broad daylight. Traffickers aimed to seize the most valuable species.
Was still waiting for formal charges, it happened again.
I seen the badges on their sleeves and I was like, oh wow, here we go again.
This time, Gibson was accused of illegally purchasing wood from India.
on the rise, and now poses a real threat to this valuable economic and ecological resource.
Let's talk about woods. Wikipedia.org defines tone woods as specific wood varieties that possess tonal properties that make them good choices for use in woodwind or acoustic stringed instruments. There are many different species and varieties of tone woods. However, one constant between them all is that they are all very resonant and very sonically pleasing. Before we get into the specific tone woods, I conducted an experiment to test the resonance of tone woods compared to non-tone woods. To do this, I gathered 2 samples of different tone woods, as well as that, some wood that is not a tone wood. Here we have some mahogany, sourced from a piano from the 1800s that was sadly destroyed. Here we have some spruce bracing from an acoustic guitar that I tried to repair, that is beyond repair. And here we have some pine wood, which is not a tone wood. To test the resonance of the wood, I will be hitting them with this drumstick. Except for the spruce bracing, I just feel like it'll be a little bit too fragile for me to hit with the drumstick, so I'm just going to be hitting the 2 pieces against each other. I will be recording the sounds produced by each of these pieces of woods, and then comparing them in my audio editing software. Everything will remain the same, except the pieces of wood. Unfortunately, the original video files were corrupted, so I had to do some improvising, so we're just going to pretend that the videos that are playing are the original videos. I'm sorry about that, but it's the best that I could do. First up is the mahogany. Hello, pass to me. Mahogany wood. Next, the spruce bracing. Hi again, pass to me. Hi. And finally, the pine board. Okay, now you're just creeping me out, man. After comparing the audio files, it's clear to see the drastic difference between the tone woods and the pine board. The spruce bracing was the loudest of the 3, however the mahogany was much more resonant, as can be seen by the depth of the audio files. Finally, the quietest and least resonant, surprise surprise, is the pine board, the non-tone wood. This clearly demonstrates the resonant properties of these tone woods and why they are so important in instrument making. This is also why these woods are so often harvested. The first wood that I would like to discuss, which I call the king of the tone woods, is ebony. Ebony is also known as the $1 million tree, as it's highly sought after and it fetches a high price on the market. For thousands of years, it has been the favorite hardwood of kings, queens, pharaohs, monarchs, rulers, and the like. However, due to its high price and high demand, ebony has been used to near extinction in many different countries. There is only one place left in the world, the entire world, where you can get ebony legally, and that is the African country of Cameroon. And probably the only reason why Cameroonian ebony is extinct, and probably the only reason why we still have ebony at all, is thanks to the work of one man, Bob Taylor, the owner and CEO of Taylor Guitars. The work that he has done to preserve and sustain the ebony that's in Cameroon is truly remarkable and quite eye-opening, to say the least, on how threatened our forests are. I will now play a few excerpts of a video that Taylor Guitar released that shows Bob explaining his story about how he has saved the ebony forests for us and future generations to enjoy.
Hi, I'm Bob Taylor, and I want to talk to you a little bit about wood today. You know, it's kind of hard to believe, but the truth of the matter is that we're living in the generation when almost all of the wood species that we would use in a guitar are stressed beyond belief. And so it's going to take a lot of intervention from us as people around the world to make sure that we continue to have these woods and that for generations they continue to be there. Ebony has been a wood that for 200 or 300 or 400 years we've gone into countries and we've used the ebony until it's all gone, literally. Then we move into another country and we take their ebony till it's all gone. Why do I say we? Because ebony isn't cut in Africa for use by Africans. Ebony's cut in Africa to be sold to people like us to make things like guitars out of. That's the simple truth of the matter. There's one place in the world left where good ebony comes from, and that's the country of Cameroon in Western Africa. Cameroon has a lot of ebony left. Now, do we want to do to Cameroon what we did to Gabon or to Congo or to Madagascar or to Sri Lanka or all the other places where ebony grew and now it's illegal to take? In reality, it's the last frontier. There's no other place to go. Cameroon is it. It would be hard for me to explain to you on tape the cognitions I had by spending a year there and seeing what was going on. Boy, my eyes were opened. Only now, I own the company, and I have to ask myself what I'm going to do about it. I have a story that I'd like to share with you that took place in September of 2011. What happened on that day changed my life, and it's going to affect your life as well. I was in Cameroon, and I sat down with the subcontractors in Cameroon that cut the ebony for us. Their job is to go out into the forest and bring in the ebony into our factory. They cut under our license and are inspected and stamped all the way from the forest back to our factory. I wanted to ask them how it was going because we were going to become the new owners within a few short weeks. Well, they said it's going poorly because they feel they have to work too hard for the money that they make. I inquired a little bit more. Tell me more about that. Well, it used to be that the ebony was by the roads, but all these years later, the ebony is 5 kilometers or 8 kilometers away from the roads, meaning we've got to walk back into a jungle forest 8 kilometers, cut down a tree, chop it up into little blocks, carry it out on our backs to the road where we can truck it away. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work, I thought. And what about the price of the ebony? Well, we barely make enough money to cover all of our costs, and we can't use any of the B-grade wood. What's wrong with the B-grade wood? Well, you don't pay enough money for it. The value is 1/5 of what the A-grade wood is. And the difference between the B-grade and the A-grade? Well, the B-grade has color in it. It's got gray and vanilla streaking through it, and what everybody wants is the black wood. Yes, I know people love black wood, but tell me more about this other wood. Well, it's of so much lower value that we don't really bring it into the factory because we would lose money if we did the work and brought that wood in. It's the same amount of work for us to bring in either type. I understand. How do you tell if the wood is good or not? Well, we have to cut down the tree. We cut it down with our chainsaw and we look at the stump, and if we see the streaks in it, we don't take it. That's right. You leave it there? Yeah, we just leave it there. How about you? Is that what you do? Yes, that's what we do. And you over here? Is that what you do? Yes, that's what we do. So you cut down trees until you find the black one that our customers want. Yes, that's the only tree that can be used. Okay. How much wood do you need to bring in? Well, it's a lot of work, but we have to bring in 6 tons a load. How many trees does it take for that? It takes 2 trees. Can you tell me, how many trees do you need to cut down to get 2 black trees? Well, we cut down 20 trees. Is that right? Do you cut down 20 trees? Yes, we cut down 20 trees. And you? That's about right. We cut down 20 trees. I said, what if the price for the 2 were the same? What if we paid you the same amount of money for the trees with color as the trees that are black? Well, that would be great. We would have to cut down a lot less trees. We could earn a living. We could bring it in. But you can't use that, can you? You can't what we've heard is that you can't use the trees with color. Well, starting today, we can use the trees with color. Who says you can? I said we can. That's the story I wanted to tell you.
Thanks to the work of Bob Taylor, our ebony forests will be sustained for many years to come. The next wood I would like to cover is rosewood, my preferred guitar wood. Rosewood is known for its impressive resonance and its mellow tone. It is incredibly beautiful, with streaks of dark and light figuring across the entire board. However, I'm not the only one who enjoys rosewood, as several varieties of rosewood are incredibly threatened, and poaching has gone up in the past few years. The shady tonewood black market continues to threaten the rosewood supply. In these photos, you can see armed guards actually guarding rosewood trees in order to protect them from poachers. In a million years, I never thought I'd see an armed guard guarding a tree, but here we are. The highest quality of rosewood is Brazilian rosewood. In the 1950s through the 1970s, guitar manufacturers used copious amounts of Brazilian rosewood without a second thought. However, in the 1970s, it became clear that the Brazilian rosewood was suffering from over-harvesting. And ultimately, the harvesting of Brazilian rosewood was banned in 1992. From the late 50s to early 1992, both Fender and Gibson, two of the largest guitar manufacturers in the world, used Brazilian rosewood to build entire guitars out of, which illustrates the extent at which they used Brazilian rosewood without a second thought. I'm now going to play a quick clip about the Gibson Crest, an all-Brazilian rosewood guitar that Gibson produced from the early 60s to the early 70s.
But what makes the Gibson Crest so special is that it uses Brazilian rosewood veneers, and these things were produced from the late 60s into the very early 70s. And you could either have them in gold hardware like this, from 69 to 71, or all the way up until 72 you could get silver plating. But this having Brazilian rosewood was a big deal because Gibson had discontinued Brazilian rosewood because that's when conservationists really started to crack down. Now there's been limited runs here and there, but the Crest has always held a soft spot in my heart because it's one of the rare 70s models that you could find Brazilian rosewood on, similar to the Brazilian rosewood top Les Paul Custom. And I've personally always wanted to document one of these, but finding one that I particularly liked was kind of difficult and they were always really expensive.
Luckily, there are many other varieties of rosewood around the world that can be used sustainably to keep manufacturing guitars. But for now, Brazilian rosewood is a thing of the past. The next major tonewood I'd like to talk about is a tree that we're all familiar with as they're native to the area, the maple tree. Since maple trees are all too common and we're mostly familiar with it, I won't touch too much on it. However, there are some rare features in some maple wood examples that are highly sought after and come at a higher price. These qualities are flame maple figuring, as seen here, quilt figuring, as seen here, which personally I find very beautiful. And bird's eye figuring, which I really don't like. If you have trypophobia, I'm sorry. These three types of figured maple are highly sought after and can fetch a pretty high price on the open market. They are typically saved for the highest end of guitars and are incredibly beautiful. Also, if anybody has a few $1,000s lying around, this guitar is absolutely beautiful and I'm in love with it. Oh my gosh, I need it. It's like, moving on. Mahogany is a very beautiful wood. It's well known for its lightweight and resonant properties. While mahogany isn't exactly threatened, it has become more scarce over the years and therefore has fetched a higher price tag. Like maple, mahogany can also have quilt figuring, But in addition to that, it can have beautiful ribbon mahogany, which has this vertical kind of line figuring. It's absolutely beautiful. Spruce is a wood that is commonly used in the construction of acoustic guitars. Spruce is well known for its distinctive wood grain and its bright, airy tone. While certain species of spruce, like Sitka spruce, are threatened, there are many other species of spruce, such as Adirondack spruce, that are not as threatened and can be continually and sustainably used. Ash is another wood species that we're probably familiar with, as ash is a native species to Michigan. Ash was commonly used by Fender guitars from the early 50s to the early 70s for guitar body woods. Ash is notable for its distinctive wood grain. However, ash trees in recent times have been threatened due to not only human harvesting, but invasive species. Specifically, the emerald ash borer, which has wiped out a massive portion of the ash tree population. These little small bugs bore into the trees. That's why they're called the emerald ash borer. This boring into the trees kills the tree, and then they spread on to the next tree, and then the next tree, and then the next tree, and pretty soon an entire forest will be gone. For this reason, ash nowadays demands a very high price and is used on very limited edition models that are typically very expensive. The very first of the alternate woods that I'd like to talk about is alder. Fender started using alder wood to replace ash wood as it started to become more and more scarce and more expensive to produce. Alder is a very good substitute for ash. Although it doesn't have the distinctive wood grain, it has the same tonal qualities and a relative overall feel as ash. Basswood is another species of wood that is commonly found in the US and even here in Michigan. Basswood is known for being incredibly cheap and incredibly common. Basswood is often used on budget models for learner guitarists, as well as other incredibly inexpensive models. Basswood doesn't sound particularly great, as well as that it feels incredibly cheap and the wood grain could be better. As a result, many players like myself try to stay away from basswood and don't like it. Quite possibly the most resonant wood on this list, Carina, also known as White Limba, was adopted by Gibson in the 1950s to produce the Flying V and Explorer models. And although it took a few years to get there, Carina is a fan favorite and is highly sought after. Its yellow hue and distinctive wood grain caused collectors to pay out a little extra when acquiring a guitar made of Carina wood. Pau Ferro and Indian Laurel are two woods that are substitutes for rosewood. Most brands have seen the widespread adoption of these woods on the fretboards of their budget models. Visually, these woods are much lighter in color than rosewood, but sonically they sound just about the same. The caveat is that these woods feel a tad bit dry and a tad bit cheap when played. As a result, I don't particularly like these woods, but I am okay with them. Walnut is another species of wood that's found in the United States. Walnut is known for its dark brown color, distinctive wood grain, and lightweight. Comparative to other woods on this list, walnut is also relatively cheap and relatively common as well. In fact, in the 1970s, Gibson made a line of budget guitars made entirely out of walnut. In recent years, these guitars have become somewhat of a cult classic and had a major resurgence in popularity among players. Koa is a wood that originates from Hawaii. It is known for its lovely tone, multicolored wood grain, and distinctive patterns. Koa tends to be a love it or hate it kind of wood. Either you love the way that it looks, or you don't. As a result, Koa is not super often used on guitar tops because, let's face it, if there's not that much of demand for the guitar with Koa on it, they're not going to make as much guitars with the Koa on it. As a result, guitars with Koa typically cost more because there's less of them made, and they're trying to pander for those die-hard Koa fans. Me personally, I'm indifferent to Koa. I don't really feel either way about it. Sometimes it looks nice, sometimes it doesn't look as nice, but regardless, the guitar is beautiful to me, so. Wenge is a wood known for its distinctive dark color and its impressive wood grain. Since Wenge is often hard to work with as it's an extra hardwood, most makers don't make guitars with Wenge. As a result, Wenge guitars are much more rare and cost much more. Finally, the most bizarre choice on this list, Purple Heart is a wood known for its impressive wood grain and its distinctive, oddly purple color. Since it is also not a wood that's commonly used, people pay a much higher price to get guitars made with Purple Heart. However, in my opinion, it's worth it because Purple Heart is such a beautiful wood, and I would have a Purple Heart guitar if I could afford it. Now, let's discuss some alternative to woods, the first of which is aluminum. Since Travis Bean made his first prototypes in the 1960s, aluminum guitars have found their niche in the guitar community. The pros to having a metal guitar would be it's resistant to bending, breaking, cracking, warping like wood would. It has an insane amount of sustain, and also unlike wood, aluminum can be easily recycled, so you can either A, make your guitar out of recycled aluminum, or B, if your guitar gets damaged, you can take the aluminum and then recycle it. However, unfortunately, the best option at a sustainable guitar has some issues. First of all, aluminum can get pretty cold, and a lot of players don't like playing on a very cold neck. As well as that, if you leave it in the sun for an afternoon and then go to strum a few chords, you might get blisters on your hands. Another issue is that aluminum guitars can get pretty heavy, more so than the average guitar. If you have a bad back, it's not very ideal for you to play a guitar made out of aluminum. The final issue that I'd like to highlight with an aluminum guitar is that it takes a lot more time to make than your average guitar. That's due to the intense machining process the aluminum has to go to in order to get the desired shape. The next best option is a material called Richlite. Richlite is a sustainable material manufactured from recycled paper and phenolic resin. Fretboards made out of Richlite look and almost sound the exact same as ebony does, so it's been quite a popular substitute for when ebony is not available. However, there are some issues with Richlite. The first one is that to make Richlite, you need paper. Now, they say they use recycled paper, but regardless of where the paper comes from, it comes from a tree. So, regardless, you have to cut down a tree to be able to get, your board. The next issue is that Richlite requires very high maintenance to keep in top running shape. You have to clean it basically constantly, which can be a hassle for a lot of guitar players. I, for one, wouldn't want to spend a whole lot of time every single time I pick up the guitar to clean it. The final issue is that Richlite takes quite a while to manufacture. As well as that, you have to use a polyurethane glue adhesive to secure it to your guitar neck. That can cause some issues, as polyurethane glue can cause some issues with your fretboard woods, as well as that with other materials that are used during the guitar making process that could ultimately end up ruining your guitar. So you really have to research really well into what your guitar is made out of before switching over to a Richlite fretboard. Despite all this, Richlite has managed to keep a small group of fans and supporters. In recent years, there have been many companies who have started to make guitars out of carbon fiber. They advertise these guitars as being indestructible, easy to transport, lightweight, and they say it sounds great. Well, I've had the privilege to try out a few of these carbon fiber guitars myself, and honestly, it wasn't very good. It was very dead sounding, not very lively like a normal acoustic guitar. It was kind of like made out of plastic sounding. Like, it sounded, like dead, if that makes sense. And it didn't really play too well, it didn't sound great. I didn't like it, but is an alternative to wood. As well as that, carbon fiber is also hard and expensive to produce, which raises the overall cost of the guitar, which does not help musicians in the slightest. The next material really only has 2, 3 maybe flaws that really knock it down a step. Epoxy resin guitars are beautiful, gorgeous pieces of art. I mean, just look at that. That's gorgeous. The issue is, it requires a lot of time and materials to make. As well as that, you really have to know what you're doing when mixing up the mixture of epoxy resin, otherwise it might not turn out too well. In addition to that, a few of these examples that I pulled up here use actual wood cast in the epoxy resin. If the goal is trying to be sustainable, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of it. To be fair, the goal of these guitars is not to be sustainable, it's to look beautiful and play well. But quite possibly the worst thing I have ever seen guitar related with my own 2 eyes are these criminals, these buffoons, these sick people who put fish in guitars. I hope those fish were at least passed of natural causes before they're put in there, because that's a horrible way to go. It's sick. They're putting fish inside of a guitar. Like, imagine if that was a person in there. That's just disgusting and gross, and I hate it, and it's terrible. Moving on. The last material shouldn't even be a question as to whether or not it's a bad idea. It's a horrible idea. Somebody decided to make a guitar out of concrete. Not only is concrete incredibly wasteful, but as well as that, it's incredibly heavy. I believe the weight ended up being about 20 pounds. The heaviest guitars you'll ever run across out there in the wild would be about 15 pounds. That's a 5-pound difference. And he even weighed that without the electronics in it. The electronics would easily add another 3 pounds. So if you have a bad back or are elderly, once you play this guitar, you might not even be able to stand back up again. As well as that, it took about a year to produce instead of the usual several months that it takes a normal wooden guitar. And it was wasteful too. He went through so many materials before he was actually able to make the body. And he even just used a wooden neck and stuff like that. So plain and simply, a concrete guitar is a big no bueno for me. As you can clearly see, this is a complicated issue with a bunch of complicated pieces. Trying to find a solution for this is really, really hard. Unless if you could somehow come up with a magic material that satisfies all the needs of all the different guitar players, trying to find a sustainable, truly sustainable alternative is nearly impossible. So my proposal for a solution for this problem would really be keeping it relatively similar. I would like to see ultimately that the sustainable woods are much more widespread adopted as opposed to the tried and true methods. And I would like to see alternate materials developed other than woods. But as of right now, where things stand with such a complicated topic, there's not really a whole lot I can do or that anybody else can do. So all I can say is just try to embrace these other woods much more readily. As well as this, banning the tone woods outright would not do anybody any good. You know, we all need music in our lives, and you can't really take the guitar away from it. It's the instrument of the people. You know, we all need this instrument culturally to enrich our lives. Taking away these woods and taking away these instruments would be a greater disservice to society as a whole. So I feel the best way forward would be better resource management, much more widespread adoption of sustainable woods in instrument building, and better conservation of the woods that we already have, as well as further research into alternative materials so that we can find a potential solution that's sustainable, that can appease most, if not all, guitar players. I feel like this is genuinely the best way forward, and frankly, the only way forward.